Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today's Thursday, March 28th. This is the 174th day since October 7th. Today is Maundy Thursday. For those of us who are observing Holy Week, this is the day that remembers the Last Supper, a significant meal that Jesus shared with his disciples the night before his crucifixion. In the news, in terms of Israel, Netanyahu communicated that he's now willing to resend the delegation that he had withheld from coming to Washington, D.C. to talk to Biden officials about alternatives to the Israeli invasion into Rafah. Just a reminder, I had mentioned this, that there is a bombing campaign. There already is a ground invasion well into Gaza. And the question is whether or not Israel will have a full-on ground invasion into the southernmost city of Rafah. And so a delegation was supposed to come when the U.S. abstained in the UN Security Council vote earlier this week about the ceasefire resolution. Netanyahu said that the delegation would no longer come, and a few days later, he's now willing to resend them. We did get an update in a board check-in I had today with Churches for Middle East Peace that a Department of Service to Palestinian Refugees, the DSPR, of the Middle East Council of Churches clinic that is in Rafah was hit and impacted by a bombardment yesterday. It's been closed for repair and assessment. It has been providing for 500 patients a day, medical and psychological services, despite significant hardship and limited capacity and supplies. So while the Israeli army is not having a full on-ground invasion, bombings and other smaller, impacts, not that a bombing is a small impact, I don't mean that, but just the full on-ground invasion may not be happening, but there is still significant damage and impact of the bombing campaign, specifically in Rafah, where there are 1.4 million refugees who've been displaced and who are suffering greatly from the realities of Israel's ongoing campaign against Hamas. Today in Gaza, there has been fighting around two of the main hospitals, according to reports, where thousands of people are taking refuge. And I've seen videos of this, and it is unfathomable. Behind essentially a tarp or a sheet, family after family after family. So when you hear thousands of people are taking refuge, when you see videos walking up a staircase, on every single turn of the stairs is an entire family behind, just a tarp. And so the two refugees are Al-Shifa and Nasser Hospital. The Israeli forces are also blockading Al-Amal Hospital. And this has raised mounting concern for the safety of patients who are still there, civilians who are there, and medical staff who are there. According to Reuters, there is heavy fighting at these two key hospitals today. And the third is reportedly under Israeli siege. So there is mounting international concern. The most intense fighting, once again, appeared to be around Al-Shifa, the complex in the north in Gaza City. This was the main hospital in Gaza before the war. The Israeli army has said that it is operating around the site after storming it more than a week ago. One of the things I heard from a physician who just returned from a trip to Gaza is he said that, in the north, many of these facilities were continuing to be used by patients who couldn't evacuate. They're continuing to be used by refugees, and that there have been militants who thought perhaps that the Israeli military had left the area, but that regardless of the circumstances, all warring and combatant parties, be they Hamas, be they other militant groups, be it the Israeli army, all parties must observe international law and honor the protections of medical health facilities, medical workers who risk their lives by staying behind to serve those who are injured, in need of medical care and assistance. In the south, it was reported that Israeli tanks and armored vehicles had massed around Nasser Hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis. According to the health ministry in Gaza, that shots were fired, but there was not yet a raid launched. The Red Crescent said thousands of people were trapped inside. So just remember, thousands of people, there's not running water in these facilities. They don't have access to food. So these are sieges, where people can't get in and out when the army is surrounding or blockading the hospital. The Israeli Defense Forces claim to have killed who they identified to be 200 gunmen in the area of the Al-Shifa hospital since the start of their operation there. They claim that they are preventing harm to civilians, patients, medical teams, and medical equipment. I just would articulate the death toll in Gaza continues to rise every day. Today, judges at the International Court of Justice unanimously ordered Israel to take all necessary and effective action to ensure basic food supplies without delay get to the Palestinian population in Gaza. The order detailed the worsening humanitarian situation and the assistance required, including the need to open additional land crossings and expand cooperation with UN authorities. We heard yesterday that Israel said that UNRWA is no longer allowed to, take deliveries into the north. Judges also called for the immediate release of hostages that are still held in Gaza. Israeli courts today in Israel made the shocking decision in a battle over whether or not the ultra-Orthodox should have to serve in the Israeli military. The High Court ordered on Thursday a freeze on the funds of yeshivas that fail to send their students to military service. The injunction is the latest in the last-minute legal and political wrangling, which has now reached a boiling point in Israel. The Palestinian Authority has announced the formation of a new cabinet as it faces international pressure to reform. So Mahmoud Abbas, the president, he's been the president of Palestine for almost 20 years. He announced the new government. None of the incoming ministers is well known. Mohammed Mustafa, a longtime advisor, is the new prime minister. A number of the other figures will be announced in coming days. The interior minister has been announced, Ziad Hab al-Ri, the incoming minister for Jerusalem affairs, Ashraf al-Awar. And so a number of other candidates will be announced in coming days. 5 of the incoming 23 ministers are from Gaza, but it's not clear of whether or not those ministers are in Gaza or not. France has agreed to provide 30 million euros to the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, to support its operations. And in the UK, pro-Palestinian protesters have occupied the entrance to the government trade department over its perceived link to the supply of arms to Israel. There is a journalist in Gaza. Her name is Ba'an Abu Sultan, and she has not been heard of since March 19th. She tweeted that her only brother had been killed by Israeli forces in front of her eyes, and there's been no activity on her social media since. And so internationals and others are concerned about her safety, having not heard from her. In the West Bank, there was a shooting attack. A gunman in a military uniform, identified as a Palestinian from Jenin, wounded at least 3 people, including a 13-year-old boy who was hurt by shrapnel, according to emergency services. A third official in the United States resigned from the U.S. State Department over Gaza, saying that the Biden administration is flouting U.S. law by continuing to arm Israel and is hushing up evidence that the U.S. has seen on Israeli human rights abuses. Ireland is seeking to widen the definition of genocide to include the blocking of humanitarian aid as it relates to the ICJ case against Israel. And in the last hour, Politico reported that the Pentagon is in early talks to fund Gaza peacekeeping forces. The U.S. has said that this would not involve a peacekeeping force with American troops or American peacekeeping forces, but that they are in conversation about what it might look like to fund it. Over the past week, there have been escalations between Israel and Iranian-backed sources in Syria. And in the past 24 hours, 2 civilians were injured, according to reports. And I wanted to close with an update. We issued a global bishops letter and an executive leaders letter where more than 140, now it's more than 150 global leaders are standing in solidarity with Palestinian Christian brothers and sisters this Holy Week. Orthodox siblings are still observing Lent. The letter was published by religious news services. NPR did a clip about it. The Jerusalem Post picked it up. We sent it to President Biden and others officials in his administration. We're encouraging global leaders to send it to their heads of state. And it says the global church and the world cannot be silent as people continue to die in Gaza by military assault, lack of adequate medical care, hunger, and disease. World leaders have responded with empty rhetoric and political volleying about addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza while ignoring the direct causes of the catastrophe. We note that the US, the UK, Israel, and other countries must uphold their responsibility as signatories to the Convention on the Prevention of Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And we call for a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire. And we call on the US and world powers to halt additional military support and arms to Israel and to not be complicit in the ongoing military campaign that is having such a devastating impact on the civilian population of Gaza. I would invite you to join us on Saturday during Holy Saturday with our Palestinian partners in the Holy Land, 3 p.m. Eastern time. You can find that on CMEP's social media. Keep your eyes out. If you're on our bulletin, you can register for that link. We will be inviting anyone to sign on to that global letter. And so we'd invite you to join us in that. We still have Gaza ceasefire pilgrimages happening. They will continue after Easter as well. And so be in prayer. We have another one of those tomorrow in Philadelphia, calling for an end to arms that are being used to kill so many innocent people. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. May God go before us, those in Gaza, those in Israel, those in the Holy Land, as we call for peace.